She's already asked you the question. You just didn't hear it as one. Somewhere in the last few weeks, a woman said something to you that sounded completely ordinary, and you answered it the way you'd answer any casual comment. But it wasn't casual. It was a test, wrapped in small talk, designed to feel like nothing at all. That's exactly why you missed it. These questions are built to sound harmless, so they can be asked safely, without risk, without exposing what's actually being measured underneath. On this channel, we look closely at the parts of female behavior that rarely get explained honestly. Not the obvious signals, but the quiet mechanics underneath them. And today, I am going to show you the 2 specific questions a woman asks when she is quietly checking whether you are safe enough to get close to. Not signs, not vague body language, actual questions, ones you've almost certainly already heard, possibly this month. By the end of this video, you'll be able to recognize both of them the moment they happen, understand exactly what they're really asking, and know how to answer in a way that pulls her closer instead of pushing her away. What she's really asking is rarely what the words suggest. It usually comes out sounding like nothing at all. That's what makes it easy to miss. A woman rarely walks up and says, "I need to know if I can trust you with my time." Or, "I want to know if you think about me when I'm not around." That would feel too exposed, too risky, too much like handing over information before she knows what you'll do with it. So instead, the real question gets folded into something smaller, a passing comment, a lightly asked detail, something that could just as easily mean nothing. Researchers who study early relationship formation have observed that people test emotional safety indirectly before they test it directly. They call this low-stakes probing, which simply means asking something small enough that a rejection wouldn't sting, before risking something bigger. She is not being evasive, she is being careful. Think back to a conversation that once seemed ordinary, one where you walked away without realizing what had actually just happened. You answered the surface question. She was listening for something else entirely. Of course, not every casual question carries this weight. Sometimes a question really is just a question. But when it's paired with a certain kind of attention, a pause before she asks, a stillness while she waits for your answer, that's when the disguise starts to slip. That stillness is the tell most men never learn to notice. But the words are only half the message. The other half is in why she's asking it at all. You've heard this one 100 times. You've probably never once heard what it was actually asking. What are you doing this weekend? Do you have plans later? Are you free Thursday? On the surface, these sound like scheduling, practical, forgettable. But when a woman asks a version of this question to someone she's genuinely evaluating, she is very rarely asking about your calendar. She is asking whether there is room for her in your life, whether your time, your attention, your world has any space that could eventually include her. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as an inclusion bid, a subtle attempt to find out if you would make space for someone without directly asking to be that someone. Now, you might be thinking, couldn't this just be normal curiosity or even just politeness? And sometimes, yes, that's exactly what it is. But here is the detail that separates habit from signal. Genuine scheduling questions come with logistics attached, because I might need the room, or because a few of us are meeting up. The inclusion bid version comes without a reason at all. It's the question with no follow-up purpose, asked slightly slower than the rest of the conversation, sometimes with a flicker of hesitation right before it. That hesitation is the actual signal, not the question itself. This does not mean every unattached "what are you up to" is loaded with meaning. Context always matters. And plenty of people ask this out of simple habit. But when it's paired with prolonged eye contact or asked right after a moment of genuine connection in the conversation, the pattern becomes far harder to dismiss. Most men answer this question logistically. Not much, probably just relaxing, and then move on, satisfied they gave an honest answer, which it was. It just wasn't the answer to what she was really asking. The first question tests whether you have room for her. The second tests something much harder to fake. This one costs her something to ask. That's exactly why it matters more. Do you ever think about, finish that sentence however it showed up for you? Do you ever think about that trip you mentioned? Do you ever think about what would have happened if? Do you ever think about us, back when things were simpler? Unlike the first question, this one cannot hide behind logistics. There's no calendar to point to, no group plans to mention as a cover story. It exposes something real, that she has been thinking about a version of the future, or the past, that includes you specifically. Behavioral researchers who study vulnerability in early emotional bonding describe this kind of statement as a self-disclosure risk, meaning the person asking is voluntarily revealing more of their internal world than the conversation strictly requires, with no guarantee of how it will be received. That is a real risk. If you respond with indifference, she absorbs that rejection quietly, and the conversation moves on as if nothing happened. Except something did. Of course, this does not mean the phrasing is always this literal. It might arrive as, "I keep thinking about that thing you said," or "This reminded me of you actually," said almost in passing, then followed quickly by a change of subject, as if she needs to create distance right after getting close. That quick retreat right after the disclosure is often the clearest confirmation that it meant something. Before we move to how you respond, there is one additional layer to this that most explanations completely skip over. The fact that she is watching your reaction in the 3 seconds immediately after she says it, far more closely than she's listening to your actual words. Remember what I told you at the start, that there was one signal most men not only miss, but actively misread. We are getting close to it now. Understanding why she asks is only useful if you also know how to answer, because most men get this part wrong. The question was never really the hard part. The answer is where most men lose ground they didn't know they had. When the first question lands, some version of, "What are you up to?" the flat response is a one-word answer with no curiosity returned. Nothing much. It's not wrong exactly. It's just closed. It gives her no opening to continue testing, so she quietly stops. The response that keeps the door open is small but specific, naming something real, then turning the question back toward her with genuine interest, rather than reflexive politeness. Something like actually mentioning what you're doing, then asking what she's got going on, and meaning it. When the second, heavier question lands, the "do you ever think about" version, the instinct for a lot of men is to deflect with humor, because sincerity feels exposed and slightly uncomfortable. But deflection here reads as disinterest, even when that isn't the intention at all. Now, you might be thinking, isn't it safer to keep things light, especially if you're not sure what she means? Sometimes, yes. But the cost of playing it safe here is that she rarely asks twice. The response that works is a brief, honest acknowledgement before the conversation moves on naturally. Not an overcorrection, not a speech, just a moment of letting the sincerity land before continuing. Both questions are really one system, testing the same underlying thing from two different angles. Whether you have space for her, and whether that space is emotionally real. There's one more layer to this, and it's the one almost nobody talks about. Here's the part almost every man misses completely, because it looks like the opposite of a problem. When a woman who used to ask these questions simply stops, most men read that as things settling down, as comfort replacing effort. Sometimes that's true, but often it means the opposite entirely. She stops testing, not because she's secure, but because she's already concluded the answer, and decided the risk of asking again isn't worth another quiet non-response. This is what makes silence so easy to misread. There's no dramatic moment, no confrontation, nothing that announces itself as a problem. Just a gradual absence of the small questions that used to arrive so naturally. Of course, people naturally ask fewer questions as familiarity grows. This isn't automatically a red flag. But when it follows a pattern of flat or distracted responses to these exact kinds of questions earlier on, the silence starts to look less like comfort and more like resignation. That is the moment most men walk away from without realizing it. You now understand something most men never learn, that these two questions are not conversation filler, but quiet checkpoints, asking whether you have room for her and whether that room is real. The zoomed out truth is simple. Attention that feels indirect is often the most honest kind, because it costs less to give and less to have ignored. You don't need to overanalyze every sentence a woman says to you now, turning every casual comment into a hidden test. That would exhaust the very thing you're trying to protect. You just need to notice when the pattern repeats, when the pause lingers a little longer than it should, when the subject changes a little too quickly right after something real was said. That awareness alone puts you ahead of almost everyone she's ever asked these questions to. I read every comment on these videos, so tell me, which of these two questions has she asked you recently? And did you catch it at the time? If this kind of insight is useful to you, there's a lot more of it here, because understanding what's actually happening underneath ordinary conversations changes how you experience all of them. Next time, I'll show you the physical signal that confirms everything these two questions already told you.